Tuesdays. And today I have a super special show for all of you. We have musicians, we have a conference, we have artists, we have art professors, and I'll introduce them in just a second, but I wanted to kind of tease you guys with a little bit of what we're going to be talking about. Is we're going to be discussing Romanticism and the idea of resurrecting Romanticism, and something that is near and dear to my heart, which is art and adding more art into your lives, which is something I am very passionate about. So first, I want to introduce everybody on the chat with me, on the video with me. I have, and I'll say your name, and if you could just tell me your specialty and what's your profession essentially. David Barry.
Well, I'm a professor of music at Converse University, which is part of the reason we're on here. And I teach music history, theory, composition, technology, business, and also the Beatles. But on the conference, one of my passions is music aesthetics. And so that's what I'm talking about. And that's my expertise in this context. I'm also a horn player and a conductor and a composer.
All right, man of many talents. I like it. Alan.
Okay, yeah. So I'm the token opera singer, amongst other things. Also do audiobook narration and other things. But for my purposes now, I'm an opera singer.
Oh, great. Okay. So, and yeah, I have on the website, it says tenor is what it says next to it. So that's okay. Great.
Okay, you're right. I should leave it.
Yeah. I like it. Stephen Siek.
Yeah, thank you, Kirk.
Yeah.
I teach anything pretty much connected with the history of music. I've taught from the ancient world all the way up until the late 20th, early 21st century. My specialty tends to be American music. If you don't go too deep into some of the weeds, like as my wife says, don't ask me about too much after 1950. So if you're talking about, the big band era, things like that, yes, I've taught that material a great deal. I've taught Broadway a great deal. And I also do a lot of piano, and all the books I have written have been about the piano and on the piano in various and sundry ways. And I still play, which perhaps we'll hear a little later today.
Yes, we will definitely be hearing some opera and music and on this show. So stick around for the show. And last but not least, Madeleine McEntire. Did I get it right?
McEntire.
Okay, McEntire.
I am a pianist, and I work at Converse as adjunct faculty, mostly teaching things in the theory department. But for the purposes of the conference, I'm the conference manager, and probably my biggest passion is music entrepreneurship, which is related to being a manager.
Music entrepreneurship. So just out of curiosity, is that like helping musicians start a career, or is there something else? I've never heard that.
Financial literacy for people in a field where nobody cares. And it's glamorous to not care. It's that.
Interesting. Okay. That's really interesting. Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard of that, but I think
there's a whole spiel for that we can do later.
Yeah. That's super important though. I appreciate that. So the conference is Resurrecting Romanticism, which of course implies that Romanticism, one, existed, and two, is no longer really in existence or is not really there. And I wanted to ask you guys a little bit about why you thought you needed to resurrect Romanticism. What is Romanticism? And we'll kind of just go around to talk about like this movement. And I know a lot of the viewers who are probably Ayn Rand fans who are interested in, maybe they've read the Romantic Manifesto. They've, have some experience, or they've heard this thing. Some of them maybe know a lot, some maybe not much. But I do think there's a lot of confusion about it. And it's interesting to me having the ability to talk to all of you who are musicians about Romanticism, because I think that's a little bit of for me, it's been a little bit more of a challenge understanding Romanticism in music versus literature, particularly novels. And, especially when reading this. So I would like to hear from each of you. And I'll let you guys decide who goes first this time. But just a little bit about what you think Romanticism is, why you're trying to resurrect it, why it's important. I know it's a lot to ask to get started, but I think I want to frame it for people about what is this conference that we're all trying to talk about.
Let me suggest that Steve might want to go first.
Okay, good. All right, Steve, you're put on the spot now. David, gotcha.
What am I going to do? Well, we had been thinking about this for some time. If you've read objectivist literature very deeply at all, you would have to realize that for Ayn Rand, art was not some sort of marginal luxury or marginal value that, it's like something like occasionally somebody might buy a new car. Their life is going to go on even if they don't buy the new car, but it would be a very, very nice thing in their life. She really didn't view art that way. She did not feel that it was a marginal value. She thought that it was a psychological necessity. And not everyone here probably was acquainted with Marianne Suries, but who was a wonderful art esthetician. And she used to talk about, for example, cave paintings. And they really were significant to the culture of those people because, as she often pointed out, you are not simply illustrating, because you want to draw, some sort of like a saber-toothed tiger or something like that because you want to test your artistic ability. But they were drawing something that to them was important. And that's really, in essence, what art does for you. But as Miss Rand defined it, it's something that an artist recreates reality according to his or her, I guess we could say, metaphysical value judgments. That is what they most deeply value, what they most deeply, how is sort of the defining tenor of their existence. And we felt we wanted to commemorate that. You held up the book, The Romantic Manifesto. And of course, I think a lot of people here may know that because I was privileged to be involved in a conference a couple of years ago in Cleveland, which was a wonderful conference, and we were commemorating, I'm sorry, I believe it was the 50th anniversary of the Romantic Manifesto.
Yes. And that was a great conference. I love that. I actually am the one who I worked with Quint Cordair and traveled with all that art to Cleveland. But yeah, so Stephen, I think that, this idea of romanticism as a complicated or as a necessity is something that a lot of people don't think about. And I actually, the one thing I wanted to say, you kind of stole what I wanted to say. So I'm so in love that we're all on the same page. Is I have conversations with objectivists all the time that this could be really smart, really good people, highly intelligent, even very successful people. And I asked them about like what they love about Ayn Rand, where they heard about it. And I'm hearing this increased thing about in nonfiction and that they love nonfiction, but they don't really like the art, the nonfiction, or it's okay. Right. And they get it for the ideas they like. And I'm absolutely blown away by this whole idea. And even people who read the Romantic Manifesto for the ideas. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're doing. Like this, to me, it makes no sense because like you said, Ayn Rand did not think of art as a frill, as a side thing, that it's a necessity for a, full life. So let's move on to, I'm going to just kind of call on Madeleine this time. We'll go this way. I'm going to call.
Can I say one more quick thing, Kirk?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, about the Cleveland conference, which I was privileged to be participant. We could not do everything there. As you probably know, we tried, the Institute tried to get, for instance, what I was talking about Rachmaninoff. They tried to get me a piano. That was much more easily said than done. And it was almost impossible because hotels today, modern hotels, simply do not like to provide you with nice grands or never mind a concert grand, even a small grand piano. That just doesn't happen as a rule. And we felt that doing it here in this wonderful venue, Converse University, for music especially, we could provide the appropriate hardware, software, put it like that if you want to, of the concert world. So we have beautiful pianos. Well, you'll hear one in just a moment. And so we thought the facilities would be, doing justice to the, what should I say, the subject matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And we'll come back. So Madeleine, what is Romanticism? Why are you resurrecting it?
So actually, I did not choose what we called the conference.
Okay.
I got told what we were doing for the conference, and I agreed I believe I agreed to the conference before we titled it. Because for me, it's a business endeavor, right? So I was happy to do that, whatever we called it. But in general, I'm very black and white when I think of Romanticism, because I think it's a movement, right, in arts and literature. And I think it's a state, a quality of being. You can be romantic, you can act romantic. And actually, that made me think of what you just said about nonfiction and people who I don't like nonfiction. I actually hate nonfiction. It's my least favorite. And when we were talking about this conference and it was Resurrecting Romanticism, and even that title is romantic. And I thought, oh, that's like fluffy. But sure, we'll do whatever you want. I'm the conference manager. I don't care what we call it. I realized that Romanticism, the reason it's so important is for that reason. I tend to be a little more black and white, a little more, feelings. A romantic comedy. Like, can you explain it to me? Like, why is that enjoyable? And then I realized, wow, people like me really need this conference to be able to step back and enjoy these things that are worth enjoying. But it does take someone sitting me down saying, pay attention to this for these reasons before I can really do it. And the conference is a great way for people. I mean, I have a hard time with that. I work in music. I play a lot of romantic music, and I still have a hard time with that, and thinking about it that way. So it's a great way to kind of display all those characters. And for me personally, have it kind of beat into me by people who really know what they're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. So I sympathize with that a lot. Music is not my highest knowledge base when it comes to art. I'm more of the drama, poetry, novels, and things like that. And one of the things I've been exploring on my personal podcast at Kirk Barbera is reaction videos to different types of music, because I go into completely naked, and not really naked, but I mean like knowledgeable naked. And I try to just experience something that people say to me is great. Like now I haven't done classical music yet because I already kind of like, that's my favorite type of music, but it's more like something like the band that a lot of objectivists like is Rush. But it's the same kind of thing that you're talking about, Madeleine, where I'm trying to elevate, I know that there's something valuable here and I want to elevate. And that's something that maybe Romanticism and conferences that have music, that have opera from professional singers, professional performers. This is not an amateur production. These are full-time professionals doing this conference and putting on all the performances. So let's move to David Barry, and you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts about what is Romanticism and why it's important.
Well, first, throughout history, you can study all the literature, art, and music. It portrays man in a certain way, humans in a certain way. And Romanticism, which followed the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, not by accident, was the first time in art that the heroic nature of man, and actually that a human has control over their destiny. That's totally unique. Like with Shakespeare, as great as he is, there's a tragic flaw. When Macbeth shows up on the stage, it doesn't matter what he does for the next 3.5 hours, because we already know he's going to suffer, and it's going to be a tragedy. And so the Romantic school grew out of the Enlightenment and the humanism of the Renaissance. And it's an expression, the first expression of that. And of course, a lot of people talk about the literature of Victor Hugo. Most people probably don't know the most popular dramatist of the time was Schiller, and William Tell, the heroic guy that shot the arrow off the sun's head and stuff like that. At one time, that play had been performed more times than any other play in the history of the theater.
I did not know that.
And it's because that is so empowering the individualism and the heroic idea. And so the question arises, well, an aside, I've been teaching music history courses for years. All the music history textbooks and everything, they mention that aspect, but then they say things like belief in the supernatural and love of nature, and they think that, well, but love of nature and supernatural's been in all art. The only thing that's really defining and different in Romanticism is the heroic nature and the individualist nature, focusing on humans and humans as having free will and able to exercise it. That was new. And so there were there were books, and there were plays and everything, and paintings, and but with music, the first musician who said, I'm important. In other words, I'm not just part of some cog. Pay attention to what I'm doing, and I believe there are rules, but I get to decide what they are. And his name was Beethoven. Mm. And Beethoven straddles. He was writing more like Mozart and Haydn. There are elements of Romanticism in those guys, but he just came out. I used to have fun when I taught Romantic music. When I got to the Beethoven Third Symphony, the Eroica, the heroic symphony, that's not by accident, but that's what it's called. And there are many ways that Beethoven expressed heroism that other composers didn't. But one of the things I did, like for instance, many symphonies would start off with a slow introduction and then start having fast music. Beethoven, with the Eroica Symphony, he says, I'll show you what an introduction is. Bam, bam, and then dee-da-da, straight into the tune. Nobody in the history of music even thought of that, much less tried it. But he said, I'm me. I'm expressing what I want to do. I'm expressing it the way I want to do it. This is the way I define things. And here you go. And when I used to play that for my students, since I had used that as even though Beethoven was doing romantic things earlier in the piano sonatas and stuff, that really was like a shot heard around the world. And so I would go in class, I would play those first two chords of the symphony, and then I pulled out a starter pistol and fired it to see if I'd make sure there wasn't a dry seat in the house. And
that sounds fun.
Yeah, well, I can't do that today because they have SWAT and everybody show up. But the point is to be dramatic. That there were a lot of constraints on music and music making and creativity that the composers always worked in popular music and in classical music. And with the Romantic era, everything exploded. All the new instruments, the piano came into being in the Romantic era. The orchestra, the way we know it today, came into being in the Romantic era. The virtuoso musician that focus on, like Franz Liszt, a great piano player. You like Rush. What's so great about Rush is those three musicians are all virtuosos. Well,
I did not say I liked Rush. I said I was doing reaction videos. They're growing on me.
Well, okay. Well, and I'm not,
they're a little bit wild for me. They're okay. I'm not
the biggest,
but I know what you're
saying.
saying.
I'm not the biggest Rush fan, but anybody who thinks they're not virtuosos is not too bright. But the point is that whole idea of that, being a showcase for a superb musicianship, well, that happened in the Romantic era, and that was more subdued in other eras. There were always people who were good at being musicians, but that was when it came to the forefront. So it's a focus on the individual and the heroic nature of man. That's what Romanticism is. And in music, it was expressed with all those things I just mentioned.
So Alan, I'd like to, after you introduce this or talk about this a little bit, I'd like to play the song that you guys brought. So if you could set that up as well. Okay. But I thought, if you could say something about Romanticism, but also, I don't know if you have anything particular to say about the resurrecting, so the today part. Maybe we could start transitioning into why it's important today, and for not just professors and students, but for each of our souls, each individual. I'm not a PhD. I'm just a guy who wants to experience great art, right? That's it. I joke around that I'm a trucker who likes poetry. Not really. I was a trucker a little bit, but so that's how I think that it's supposed to be for people like me to some degree, right? But that's just my opinion. But tell me what you think about the resurrecting romanticism.
Well, there's been a lot of good ground laid out. So speaking as a singer, vocalism definitely had periods as well. I mean, the music impacted the vocalist, actually the instrumental performer as well. You have to be able to play the music that is being given you to play. And there in the Baroque era, there was certainly a lot of virtuosity. It was kind of about that, where they're working out the rules of music and they're working out what these instruments are capable of doing and pushing the boundaries so that they could come up with instruments that could actually handle that. But the pianoforte, as David said, didn't show up until you needed loud, soft, until you needed that sort of emotional expression. The classical period, there was a lot about balance, and the vocalists were basically learning their range, and certain voice types started emerging and so forth. It was the Romantic music that made demands on singers that changed the nature of singing. And we're talking here about the 19th century. There were no microphones. There was a need to be able to sing over an orchestra. That orchestra increased over the Romantic era in order to include the highs and lows of experience of that heroic person as they're fighting for their values. And so the actual nature of vocalism changed, as we're going to have to put out a lot more voltage here. We're going to be, the high notes are going to be like a goal maybe, as opposed to, it's, whatever, I can touch that and, do lots of frills and runs. The Baroque period was full of trills and runs. And the way they expressed happiness and sadness was how many notes. Then the classical period, things kind of got more worked out and more balanced, and singers grew into that. Then came people like Beethoven, but also people like Verdi and the Germans and Schumann and Strauss, and the Romantic period demanded that these voices were capable of getting out over a larger orchestra with more emotional impact, more nuance, it changed. So as a singer, I look at it, a little bit differently, because basically I'm feeling the results of what you guys just asked me to do. Thank you very much. And some singers were able to adapt, and it grew up a whole new, generation of singers able to do this stuff. And the reason we're talking about resurrecting, well, I'm not the one who came up with the title either. So Madeleine and I have a similarity there, but I do see it as if you're going to talk about Romanticism, you need to resurrect the understanding, the foundations for the Romantic music. If you're going to make people appreciate what was gained, because shortly after Romanticism in opera, for instance, we had Verismo, which said, "Oh, I really love that passion." The Hollywood people came in with their sunglasses, and I love that. I want more of that. But let's just use whores and really bad guys, and they'll beat each other up and kill each other and leave blood all over the place, and the audience is they're gonna love it. P.T. Barnum, before P.T. Barnum, and so a lot that wrecked a lot
Spectacle.
of voices right there. Right,
Maybe.
Spectacle, and so since that height of Romanticism in the high Romantic period with people like Rachmaninoff and like Strauss and Wagner, you then went into period, people were trying different things. Then you had a thing called, the First World War, where many people were killed that appreciated that. The audiences for that stuff, a lot of them died. And there was a lot of PTSD and confusion and so forth. And I'm not going over the history of life, but in you can kind of see echoes, like for instance, those techno bands like Rush, like Yes, those bands, a lot of virtuosity, but not necessarily. I mean, you'll hear a whole lot more emotion in "I Can't Make You Love Me," with Bonnie Raitt, for instance. That's that's when you have to do back up to the 20s when you start talking about microphones and how they affected the way people expressed and the intimacy and immediacy. So the high Romantic era, you have people singing off of a stage and communicating an extreme amount of emotion from a distance. So understanding that, I think, can help people appreciate what's in what we have in music, new developments, and also what might be missing and what we might want to get back. reclaim, resurrect.
So what is the song that you did right before we went live, or like an hour ago or whatever? You guys recorded this, right? Is that correct? What exactly is this? Is from an opera? This is
actually a Rachmaninoff song. Rachmaninoff had a year of writing songs. After that, he had to make a living, and he retooled himself as a pianist.
And tell people who is Rachmaninoff?
Rachmaninoff, a brilliant Russian composer who, after he moved to the United States, he did a lot of piano playing and a lot of writing music for movies, soundtracks. And, but I think, me personally, this is very biased, I think some of the greatest music he wrote is encapsulated in those little miniatures of songs that he wrote. He was quite unique to me personally. When I listen to the other composers like Schumann and Schubert and all these guys, you can hear a Schubert song and go, that's a Schubert song, that's a Strauss song, that's a Schumann song, whatever. They have a style. Rachmaninoff, in this 1 year of writing songs, every single song has its own little universe. It has its own little world, its own little setting. The way that he said it is unique. He has some stuff in there that could be coming out of the Debussy era of Impressionism, all the way back to very heroic stuff. And so this song is an absolutely gorgeous song.
What is this song?
It's the Russian is "Не пой, красавица, при мне ты песен грусти," which means "Do not sing to me, beloved of beautiful one of Russia." Basically what he's saying is, don't sing to me about the steppes because it makes me miss them. And because, basically he's thinking, he's a Russian, so he's gloomy.
Well, why don't we listen to it and then we can talk a little bit about it, each of us.
Certainly.
Maybe, because again, I want this also to be for people who maybe they've heard a little bit of Rachmaninoff or they've heard a lot. Maybe, I don't know if they've heard the song. I don't know if I've actually heard this particular song myself. So this might be a new one for me as well. So if you are listening right now, hopefully you'll stop everything you're doing for a few minutes, because I know sometimes you do a couple things at once. And let's listen to this song. And let's just, not too much more setup. Let's just listen to it, and then we can discuss afterwards a little bit what's happening and then why going to the conference is going to elevate your art life. So Daniel, if you could play that song, and I'll go on mute myself.
There wie mnie, ty pieśń Gruzji, pieczalnej, napominają dnie, a nie drugują żyzn i bierek talnej.
All right. Wow. I want to point out one thing to the listeners that that was beautiful. I really enjoyed that. And I can only imagine that being in the hall would be even better, because was that recorded on an iPhone with an iPhone microphone, or what was that recorded on?
David?
We were going to record it on a real high quality condenser microphones and stuff like that, but I ended up having to use a Zoom recorder. It had some good condenser microphones, which is, but I noticed it was kind of distorted coming across a little bit too. I'm not quite sure why. I'll have to go back and check that out later.
Yeah, I don't mean to criticize it. I just mean to emphasize how that even with, I think it, with a really high quality mic and editing and things, it would be flawless. But you did what you had to for this. But I think, like, if you're there in that auditorium, it's going to be a whole nother level of an experience.
Yeah, a lot of
and
people,
so
you're right. A lot of people feel that way when they hear a live performance, and that's another reason why we're doing it rather than doing it virtually.
As
live, because it makes a difference.
I have my co-host who couldn't make it today. I think she's still in England. Anne Chikalala is the artistic director of Austin Shakespeare, and we talk a lot about the power that there's just a somewhat of a magical extra oomph to being live. No matter how good the recording is, no matter how, what you're seeing, when you see a person 10 feet away, even 20, 30, 40, 50 feet away from you, with all the emotion and all the power that Alan was projecting, there's just, and then you see the people around you who are feeling it too, right? I'm a big fan of reaction videos. Part of it, I think, is why they're so big. There's these big videos get millions of views. Part of why I think they're so big is because we're trying to recreate that feeling of being next to somebody and seeing their face light up when they see a beautiful performance. So Alan, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, no, I think that, yes, you're right. People have to understand this. The vocalism for, operas of the 19th century were designed before the microphone to carry. And there's a whole lot, just like an optical illusion, in a way, there's an oral illusion when the way Strauss, for instance, Richard Strauss wrote, he left holes in his apparent look, felt like a wall of sound for the vocalist. And so you'll hear this massive orchestra, and yet you'll hear the voice. How does he do that? Well, you're hearing the overtones of the voice, in the 2000 range, whatever, to be technical, but you're hearing the technique that was used at the time allows you to for what you're hearing in the hall, you won't hear through a mic as well. Although modern mics are pretty impressive, but they emphasize the predominant spoken range of the voice. And so people that are singing now are using mostly, for pop in generally, it's a different technique. It's not about, projecting. It's not about a certain, this big range. It's about a speech level, conversational vocalism, just talking, yelling. The way you communicate emotion is through squeezing, yelling, whispering, the roughness, whatever. We appreciate nowadays some pretty rough voices that sound like they've been through a lot, because we say, oh, well, we can tell. That would not fly in an opera house. You would not hear that person.
And so, so thank you, Alan. I'm going to bring in the others now too. So it's part of the value of this resurrecting romanticism and trying to, so what Alan's talking about, if I understand correctly, is I have these mics and it's, and I have a condenser, for instance, right? It's condensing what my vocal range is. So what is the value to people who are used to that, like myself and others, to go to this conference to experience? Because that's one song. If you look at the schedule on the website, it looks like there's a variety of performances and there's lectures, and we haven't even talked about the visual art stuff, right? This is just the music for Resurrecting Romanticism. There's literature too. So what I'm trying to get at is, but focusing on the music part, on the songs part, on what Alan has been talking about. What is the value to people who are not as familiar with, this kind of music, to getting that full range that you're talking about? Do we really need that much? And I'll let you guys decide who to speak this time, because I'm not sure where to start.
Looks like everybody doesn't want to say anything. I guess I could.
Yeah, did I scare you all?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in what you just asked.
Okay.
Because and so maybe we should back up a little bit. Steve and I came up with the idea for the conference, and we had done a couple things. Most of the time when we go to objectivist conferences, they have some music, they have some art stuff, but it's kind of sandwiched in. And now they're even shorter. They're just the 3 times I was at a conference, I taught a course for a whole week and repeated it twice. And now most people just come in and do one talk. And so there are some fine arts things that are going on and continue to go on, but they pretty much, it's always been on the low key thing. And I've even stopped trying to participate because it's mostly like music appreciation. And I really wanted to talk about something else that I thought would be interesting. And so Steve and I, we thought first we wanted to get experts who don't usually show up at the conferences to talk about their art and how they understand it, and to have it art focused instead of have all the politics and the economics and all that kind of stuff that usually goes on at the conferences. And the reason we chose Resurrecting Romanticism is because in the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, Romantic art was the predominant art form in the world. But there was especially, everybody thought the universe was wonderful and everything was going to get better and better, and then they invented World War I, and that kind of brought it all to a screeching halt. Both the big orchestras and the emotions, and there were a lot of negative things that started showing up in the art, and so. Rachmaninoff, who was one of Ayn Rand's favorite composers, she had many favorite ones, but she mentions him a lot. He became very depressed and kind of stopped composing for a while. He did, again, Jan Sibelius, a Finnish composer writing very beautiful music that people love. He just gave up. He just quit composing. And even my hero, my favorite composer, Richard Strauss, he was the most famous composer in the world until 1950. He didn't give up, but he didn't need to, but he started working with the Nazis. So there was a lot of, darkness and expressionism and schools of art. And so the whole idea of celebrating humans and their values and stuff like that, it disappeared. And especially actually, even in Broadway and the shows, there were still some things in early theater, the 1920s and stuff, before the Great Depression and stuff like that. And so that spirit that Ayn Rand celebrated, and she said, today going to a theater, watching a movie, listening to some music, you would never guess that there was a time when the world had a different type of music, like the music we just listened to. And so Romanticism has gone downhill. This isn't when I was an undergraduate in college, and Steve knows this is true. Tchaikovsky is simply one of the most wonderful composers who ever lived. And fortunately, he's even survived all this negativity. But there was a long period in time when there wasn't even a scholarly biography about him. One of the most popular, everybody's heard the Nutcracker, everybody's heard the 1812 Overture, and everybody still loves it. It hasn't waned one bit. But some musicians and scholars would not even talk about it, did not even deign it worth talking about. So it was kind of a whole new attitude was forming toward music and a certain musical direction. And fortunately for us, right now in the 21st century, like for instance, melody sort of much disappeared in music and again in art music. Popular music, well, even in popular, think about jazz. Jazz had popular tunes and stuff, but when bop came in, bebop, in fact, that's when jazz stopped being the people's music. It became a very small group of people that responded to it. And by the way, I'm not taking anything away from the artist. I'm just saying the emotional content had changed and the approach had changed. And so with the idea with Romanticism, we want new music. That's what we'd like to hear. Well, right now we're just forced to listen to Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky because that's all we've got left over from the Romantic era. We want to see young composers and new musicians reviving it. And fortunately, melody never left like rock and roll. Melody never left Broadway shows. But even then, you got Sweeney Todd for a Broadway show, when in the 30s and 40s you had My Fair Lady and much more benevolent things that had a better, as Ayn Rand would call, sense of life to it. Now it's all about somebody with problems, emotional problems, tragedy, and so the idea of resurrecting Romanticism is we'd like to see artists, and we're using ourselves as hopefully examples, bring back into the world of art that spirit that was in there at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the very early 20th. And when, again, I don't want to, because you're not a Rush fan, I'm not, but I think one of the reasons many objectivists respond to Rush is because, and we haven't talked about this yet, but the way they write their music, the way they write their lyrics, the way they perform has a bigger than life quality that people are just starved for. You see, and they don't get it with some of the other artists that are out there. Whenever Romanticism comes in a little bit, people crave, like Top Gun Maverick had a fair amount of Romanticism in it, and that movie just shot to everybody loves it when they see even a little bit of it, much less a lot of it. And so we feel that it needs to be resurrected in every aspect of human life, all of art, because it was very powerful. Something has been lost, and we would like to see it come back.
So we're running out of time. I do have a couple super chat questions. If you guys could, maybe Stephen or Madeleine.
Could I throw in one more thing, Kirk?
Okay, we are running out of time, and I did want to talk about the conference. So, I wanted you to talk about the other speakers real quick, but go ahead, please.
Well, just to add to what David was saying, we really wanted not just to immerse people in Romanticism for 3 days, but we wanted discussions, lectures to deal with the underlying intellectual foundations of Romanticism. And we're going to get that a lot. We're getting, because I'm not lecturing, I am, it is a sesquicentennial, that's a fancy way of saying it's the 150th anniversary of Rachmaninoff's birth. So yes, I will do a talk about Rachmaninoff, but and of course we have so many people, Diane Durante and Sandra Shaw and so forth, all of whom will talk about Romanticism in their arts, whether it's painting or sculpture, in tremendous detail that sometimes there's just not always the opportunity to do at an OCON or something, because for a lot of different reasons. And that's really what we wanted to enable, not just the idea that, we want the world to be more romantic. Yes, that would be very, very nice. But you can't really count on that unless you have some understanding of what's involved there philosophically, psychologically, intellectually. And so we did want to pay a lot of attention to that. And that's what we're trying to do at the conference.
Okay, thank you. Cool. So if we could try and keep these short answers, the one of these may be a little longer of an answer, but I'll see if you guys can condense it. This comes from Apollo Zeus, who asks, how important is resonance in conveying romanticism and vocalization in music? That sounds like a challenging technical question. Do you have an answer?
I think it's a technical question. Yeah, I mean, well, okay. It's a big topic. I'm not going to hit that. I mean, resonance, a lot of people there's different definitions. You're basically talking about the natural ring in the voice, the natural qualities of the voice. A lot of that stuff is all about a classic vocal technique, which you need in order to produce these sorts of things. That's the quality that you're going to hear in a voice. And that's what's being emphasized. You can hear that in a microphone, but in an operatic voice, you're going to be hearing the voice and its characteristic overtones, which changes from person to person, and that's how you recognize your voice, my voice, Steve's voice, Dave's voice. Madeleine.
Okay. No, thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
So one more thing, and then we're going to talk about. We'll end by talking about the conference itself briefly and kind of the other artists and other people. And I actually have a question from the super chat about that. So thank you, Bonnie. I am seeing your question, but real quick. And again, let's see if you can keep this in under 30 seconds, but that's a challenge. And I don't even know what this is. This is Robert Naser. Does the Great American Songbook merit respect? I don't even know what that is. The Great American Songbook.
The Great American Songbook were all the songs written in the 20s, 30s, and 40s by people like Cole Porter, George Gershwin, and jazzers used their music to improvise on top of for years and years and years. And it's exquisite music written by brilliant musicians. There's one real problem. There are many, many songs, hundreds of songs, but it turns out there's just like a greatest hits that people that are still listening to from that era, that it's not really nearly as widely popular as it was. So it's brilliant, great music. It can be objectively demonstrated that it's brilliant and great music and worthy of listening to, but it's a little bit of a hard sell these days. And if people were more into Romanticism, they would probably be more interested in the Great American Songbook too.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you for the concise answer. Sorry for the running out of time, but I want to make sure we spend the last couple of minutes talking about the conference itself. So just to make it clear about the conference, it's called Resurrecting Romanticism. You can go to ethospg.com. It's in the show notes. October 7th through the 9th at Spartanburg, South Carolina. Which is a beautiful area, I believe. And I know this is North Carolina, but I just saw the movie Where the Crawdads Sing and all the marshes. Are there a lot of marshes near? I've never been to Spartanburg or anywhere in that area.
We have beaches and mountains. And
okay,
so
sorry. So that's more North Carolina, the swamps.
But not in Spartanburg. We don't have them both in Spartanburg.
Yeah,
okay, not in Spartanburg.
We're in the foothills.
You're more, Spartanburg's way more inland. You're like 4 hours inland from the seaside.
We're close to Asheville and what's that big house, the Biltmore House.
I don't know. Okay, so yeah, so that's where this is taking place, and it'll be taking place October 7th, 8th, 9th. There is a discount that ends August 15th, so you get $200 off if you register today, or today or in the next couple of days. So I don't know if Stephen or maybe Madeleine, you haven't been able to talk as much, Madeleine. Do you want to set up some of these other artists or talk about, because we've been talking a little bit about the music, but like I said, there's much more than music. There's performances, and like Stephen was saying, it looks like there's a lot of lectures, discussions from professionals, like all of you, talking about how Romanticism, the relevance of it in their field in particular. So I don't know who wants to key off the last bit of like what's going on, what's going to happen at the conference to give people kind of a taste. Either Madeline or
Um,
Stephen or whoever
think-
wants to do it.
I think Steve should talk about people more specifically because, like, I did not pick the name of the conference. I did not pick the people.
Okay.
But I can say that we are also doing registration on the 6th, the day before, and we are doing a cocktail kind of meet and greet social hour. So it's not just strangers dropped in October 7th, like classroom style.
Okay. Yeah. So also you can come a day earlier, you're saying.
Yes. Yes.
Kind of hang out, enjoy
Yes.
Spartanburg.
Yes.
What day is the 7th? Is that a Friday?
The 7th is a Saturday.
Okay, so you can come in on Friday,
The 6th.
spend some time in
yes.
Spartanburg. What's a big attraction to Spartanburg itself? outside of
Converse.
Converse. This
We have to say that we work there.
Okay, so is it a beautiful campus then?
It is. It is actually
Okay.
a beautiful campus.
So
So
it's
I'm
a-
not lying. It's true.
No, I believe you. So beautiful campus. Go explore the campus. Your class or the lectures will be on
They're on the campus.
auditoriums.
Yes. In the
there.
music building. Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so Stephen, you want to kind of finish off this episode of Artful Tuesday with kind of a little bit of an overview of the different speakers? And
Is it possible to scroll through their photos as we?
Yeah, I think
because
Daniel,
you've
if
got
you could
the
help
first
us with that.
Yeah, you got the first, and now you've got the. Yes, that's Rachmaninoff, of course. The sesquicentennial we're celebrating. We're having a lot of Rachmaninoff's music on Saturday evening at what we're calling a chamber concert. And okay, Alan, of course, we've already met Alan today. And I'm not sure, these are all alphabetical. David, of course, we've met David, but there's a few more. Harry Binswanger is our keynote speaker, and he will speak on Sunday evening. And it's a combination banquet and keynote speech. And he's talked to us about some ideas. I think it should be quite fascinating. And and of course, Quint and Linda will be there, and they're going to talk about the issues of running an art gallery, and they're going to talk about all kinds of issues related to the visual arts. That's both statues and paintings. And Allegra Durante, that's Diane Durante's daughter, who is a marvelous soprano, and she'll be singing some Rachmaninoff, and we haven't talked about David's opera yet. Maybe it takes a whole separate podcast to do that. David is premiering, it's the orchestral premiere of an opera based upon an O. Henry story called To Him Who Waits. And if we can roll through there, Diane has a couple of talks, and she's got one that I think should be fascinating. How can you look at a painting and get the quality of volition from it? And I confess, I don't know, but I think she's going to tell us. And we can just keep going here very quickly. John Gillis is an architect. He's written a number of books on, I wasn't aware that he believes seriously that architecture can have romantic qualities, and he's going to talk about that. And Madeleine, of course, our conference manager, we couldn't do without her. And that's Shoshana will be talking about O. Henry and that story because she is an O. Henry expert. And so she's going to help set up David's opera.
Very cool.
And Lee Pearson is coming to be on a panel with Harry, Tom Schubatham, myself, and David about musical aesthetics, getting down into the weeds a little bit. And Sandra Shaw, many people may have read Sandra's first book, Windows on Humanity. The sequel is coming, dealing with the 19th century, and that's what she'll talk about. Tom Schubatham, cellist and conductor, he will do both. And he'll also speak.
All right.
And that's pretty much it.
There. And Stephen Siek, of course. All right.
Yeah, well.
Okay. Well, thank you guys, everybody. If you're watching this, please go check out the website to get more information, ethospg.com. It's in the show notes. And go to Spartanburg October 6th. Go hang out and have some cocktails with Madeleine on October 6th and everybody else, of course. And have a good time. So thank you, everybody, for coming on the show. And I will see everybody next time.
Thanks, Kirk.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.